Another day, another bout of cozy horror. With me, Dr. Plague. Thanks for joining me. I know you can hear a little someone in the background. He's excited you're here too. He does love his belly rubs. Those of us who have children know that sometimes you tell your kids stories to get them to do what you want. Don't stay up too late, or the boogeyman might get you. Don't go out after dark, or the forest spirits might get you. Mostly it's harmless, but what happens when it's all real? Well, that's the subject of today's story, isn't it? So be sure to listen when your parents tell you something, or you might run afoul of Mr. Danver. I hadn't thought about it until last week, but it seems to have snowballed into something that's gotten out of control. I was looking through some photos while helping my mom move when I saw him for the first time in 15 years. Dad had passed away a few months ago, and Mom was just starting to clean out some of his things. The picture had been taken at a birthday party, my 9th birthday party, to be exact, and it showed my friends and I standing in front of the house and smiling as my mom took the picture. There were about 9 of us, all wearing party hats and ice cream mustaches under our noses, but the happy faces of my friends and I weren't what had caught my eye. It was the gaunt man standing in the window of the living room, the one looking out at us with the empty black eyes and the sinister little smile, the man who had haunted my childhood, though I'd never quite believed in him after the age of 12. Mr. Danver, a specter that my late father had brought to life. I remember the first time I had ever even heard of Mr. Danver, and the memory made my skin crawl. It wasn't scary because of what I had been told, but because of the unwilling way that my father had shared it. I had been 5, and we were getting ready to go to preschool. I hadn't slept well the night before, and I was cranky as I sat at the table and picked at my breakfast. I was wearing half my school clothes, 1 sock, 1 shoe, and I was so far from being ready that when my dad saw me, you could tell that he knew we were going to be late. "Come on, kiddo, we need to get moving. Finish your breakfast, get your clothes on, find your shoes, let's get on the road." I don't remember what I said to him, something snarky and grumpy, and when he turned back to me, he spoke before he had quite made up his mind to. "You better hurry and get ready before Mr. Danver comes to get you." The silence that hung after that statement was enough to make me turn my head and look at him, and that's why I saw when he slowly put a hand over his mouth. He was looking at me like he'd just sworn, and he was afraid that I would start repeating it. He seemed terrified of what might suddenly come out of my mouth. "Who's Mr. Danver?" I asked, and that seemed to seal the deal. Dad went rigid, not all at once, but slowly, like something petrifying. His eyes stared out at nothing, his mouth opening a little bit as he gasped slightly. His body seemed to be trying to fight whatever was going on and failing, his mind railing against the inevitable. He looked like a landed fish, something struggling to breathe, even as it struggles with the hook that has pulled it from the water of life. And when I asked the question a second time, the hook seemed to find its anchor, and he stopped fighting. "He comes for bad kids, naughty kids, kids who don't listen. He finds where they hide, and they go missing. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better beware. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better be scared. He's tall and old, with skin so thin. His hair is wisps, gray as tin. His teeth are sharp, his eyes are black. He'll drag you off, and you'll never come back. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better beware. When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better be scared." He delivered it all in the well-trained cadence of an off-Broadway actor at an audition. It sounded like something he had repeated 1,000 times, and I realized then that it was something I'd never forget. The scariest part about it wasn't what he had said. It was how he had said it. The voice was so different from Dad's that it was like watching a ventriloquist talk through him. Suddenly, it felt like a stranger was in the house, and I shuddered as a cold chill ran through me. I didn't say anything in the face of that silence, but when I lifted a hand to my eyes, I realized I was crying. Large, silent tears were sliding down my face, and as my dad came out of his trance, he started crying too. He came to scoop me into his arms and pressed me to his chest as he repeated the same thing again and again and again into my corn silk hair. I'm sorry. God help me. I'm so sorry. When Mom came home to find us both watching Disney movies on the couch, she asked why he had called out of work and not taken me to school. When he explained the situation in soft tones as he pressed his mouth against her ear, she joined us on the couch and pulled me into her lap. That was the first night I saw the old specter, but it wouldn't be the last. I woke up with the most profound chill I'd ever felt. It ran up my cheeks like mice feet, and my eyes popped open as I lay in bed. The room was dark, my toys casting shadows across the floor as the moon crept in through the window. But I knew those spooky shapes were not the source of my discomfort. I could almost imagine that I heard the song Dad had sung as it scampered in with the air conditioner in the vents. I could see the dust motes in the moonbeams as they boogied to that haunted chorus. And as I stared at them, that's when I saw him. He was hunkered in the corner, his knees against his chest, his arms resting on his knees. He was looking at me from the pit of shadows where he sat, and when he realized I was looking back at him, I saw a wide grin stretch across his face. His toothy mouth stretched ear to ear, and as he stood up, I could hear his joints popping like kindling wood. His hair set neatly on his head, looking like the hair you saw on zombies in horror movies, and it brushed the ceiling as he stood up. He rose until his head nestled in the corner of that ceiling, his frame all of 8 feet tall. He had a hat in his hand, a hat I would later learn was called a bowler, and his arms were covered in a rich brown suit coat. He was wearing a suit beneath it, but I was only vaguely aware of it. As he rose, the moon casting his features in contrast, I was mesmerized by his eyes. They were dark pits of shadow that looked at me with mirthful knowledge. "Sorry to wake you," he said, his voice sounding like someone who's lost their breath to excitement. "I just wanted a peek. I'm sure I'll get a closer look sometime. Toodaloo." I started screaming then, and when Dad came in and turned the light on, there was nothing in the corner but the star stickers that stuck to the ceiling above the spot. Those stickers never glowed again, and I took them down when I noticed and threw them away. I was afraid he had gotten his taint on them. Dad pulled me into a hug, Mom beside him, hugging me in an instant, and both of them held me until the shaking stopped. After that, I saw him any time I did something disobedient. Sometimes I would see him lurking in the corners of my vision if I said something smart to my mom or dad. Sometimes I would feel those black eyes watching me if I didn't do my chores. There was a time when I heard him laughing after I'd gotten angry at my mom, and I was always quick to apologize and make things right. Mr. Danver made me conscious of my actions in a way that I'd never been before, and I was a better person because of it, I suppose. I never saw him when I was rude to my friends, but just the knowledge that he might be watching me made me forgive more often, and I was less likely to be cruel to others. Sometimes when I thought about cheating on a test or taking something from a store, I would imagine him just waiting to get me, and think better of it. It all culminated when I was 12, on the day I ran away from home. I'd been looking forward to a sleepover at my friend's house that weekend, an event that was highly anticipated. Matt had one of these for his birthday every year, and a bunch of us would go to his house and eat junk food and watch movies and tell scary stories and just have the times of our lives. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, and I knew that if Mom found the math test at the bottom of my bag, the one with the big red F on it, I could hang it up. I'd buried it deep in my backpack, but not deep enough, apparently. She had found it before I could make my escape to the party, and we had gotten into a screaming match over it. It was unfair, I told her. I'd looked forward to this party for so long, and it wasn't fair that now I didn't get to go. She said that was too bad, and if parties were more important than schoolwork, then I needed to get my priorities in order. I was so mad, so furious with my mom, that I did the unthinkable before I could remember the specter of Mr. Danver. I told her I was going whether she gave me permission or not, and walked out the door before she could stop me. I ran up the street, heading for Matt's house, listening to my mom call from behind me. I expected her to be angry. I expected her to be upset. Instead, she just sounded scared. She told me to come back, that we could talk about this, but I was in no mood to listen. I was going to the party, whether she liked it or not, and nothing was going to stop me from getting there. It wasn't until I saw him standing under a burnt-out streetlight that I remembered the looming specter of Mr. Danver. When it began to flicker, I realized it had a little more juice in it. In the flickering light, I could see the tall, thin frame as he grinned at me, his translucent skin clinging to his face like a mask. He had his hat in his hand again, his immaculate suit still looking pristine in the flickering light, and his eyes reflected that flicker like a stuffed animal's. He looked unreal, standing in the everyday world, like a piece of Halloween decor that's a little too well made. He was utterly still, his head brushing the bottom of the lamp, but his fingers gave away his excitement. They drummed on the brim of his hat and made him look like a dog preparing to yank his lead and give chase. We stood looking at each other for a count of 5 before I turned and shot off towards home. Mr. Danver was coming after me just as quick, but his lack of footfalls made me panic all the more. I turned to look and saw the too-tall thing eating up the ground. His long legs moved like a spider's, and he ran like a cartoon character in big, exaggerated galumphs. He was gaining on me with every step, his strides twice my own, and I screamed in frustration and terror as I put on an extra burst of speed. To think that a moment of frustration was going to seal my fate forever. I'd been hyperfixated on my behavior for so long, and now a sudden lapse in judgment was going to kill me. "When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better beware." The wind seemed to bring the hateful words to my mind as it rushed past my ears. "When Mr. Danver comes to town, you better be scared." I was scared. I was terrified. When my house came into view, I was afraid that I would get snatched within view of the front door. Mr. Danver would reach out with one long arm and pull me into the darkness, and I'd be gone forever. It would happen just that quick, and no one would know what had gotten me. Correction, my parents would know. They would know, but how would they tell anyone? To admit to such would make them sound nuts and probably make people think that they were responsible for my disappearance. I turned suddenly, going through the gate and running up the walk, and I felt the icy chill of Mr. Danver's hand as it passed inches from me. I took the steps 2 at a time, praying the door would be unlocked, and when Mom threw it open, I leapt into her arms. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please don't let him take me." I pressed my face against her, not daring to look back into the yard. Mom whispered that she forgave me, but when she talked to Mr. Danver, Her voice was a mixture of rage and an old fear. "Get out of here. All's forgiven. There's no misdeed. You cannot take him." I kept my face pressed against my mom, but I still heard Mr. Danver's spidery voice when he answered her. "Another time, then." When I peeked back, he was gone. Dad came home an hour later, getting off work early after Mom called him, but I was still shaking and sobbing on the couch. "Why?" I asked him when he came in. "Why did you tell me about Mr. Danver?" My dad was quiet for a moment, thinking about his answer, before sighing and saying, "'Cause it's not something I meant to do. It happens. Someday it'll happen to you too as well." "Never. I would never do that to my child." I shuddered as he wrapped me in a hug, but I didn't pull away. "Sweetie, we won't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. My father didn't have a choice. No one has a choice. Once you know about him, the knowledge demands to be shared. His name is dark knowledge, a secret shared by many, and it must be served." That was when he told me how he had come to know about Mr. Danver from his father. I was playing with something on the couch when Dad told me to clean my room. I ignored him, wanting to finish my game, and when he said if I didn't go do it now, he would call Mr. Danver, I looked up, and when he said it, the look on his face was both confused and afraid. "Dad, your grandpa wasn't always the nice guy that you know. He joined AA when I was in high school, but before that he was a drunk. He could be mean when he was drunk, too, and I should have known better than to hesitate when he asked me to do something. Instead, I asked who Mr. Danver was, and when he sang me the little song, it was the soberest I'd ever seen him up until that point. The words were forced out of him like vomit, and when he finished, he threw his arms around me and told me how sorry he was. Dad looked at me, and his eyes were hollow pits. I saw him in my room that night, and it wasn't the last time either. He told me that when he'd told the story to Mom, the one about his father telling him about Mr. Danver, she'd cried and said that she'd seen him too. Her dad told her too, "One day you'll tell your kids. You won't want to, but you won't have a choice. The song is as inevitable as Mr. Danver." "What you got there?" I jumped as Mom came in and found me looking at the picture. I put it in my pocket, not wanting to remind her about Mr. Danver if I could help it. I moved to another box, Mom taking the box of photos I'd been looking through, and I tried to put the name out of my mind. It was easy to do as I worked, but as I sat at home later, still sore from a day of moving furniture and sorting boxes, I started thinking about it. If my parents and I knew about Mr. Danver, did anyone else? I pulled up Reddit and made the post before I could think better of it. I didn't know if you could transfer the knowledge like that, but I wanted to know bad enough to find out. "Hey guys, I remembered something from when I was a kid. I just wanted to know if anyone else had heard of it." My dad told me a spooky story about Mr. Danver when I was a kid, saying he would come get me. My mom knew about it too, but I was wondering if it was something anyone else had heard of, or if it was something that he made up. The post had barely sat for 5 minutes before I got a response. It wasn't the last either. "Yeah, my dad told me about him too when I was little. Seems like I must have had nightmares about it, 'cause I can remember dreaming he was in the corner of my room sometimes. OMG, so weird. That was exactly what my mom called it too. It was weird when she told me too. I thought she was having a seizure. My uncle used to tell me that he would come get me if I was bad. Wasn't there a song or a poem that went along with it too? Yeah, it was pretty catchy, but I can't remember all the words." On and on and on. The thread had around 100 comments, and Not all of them were Americans either. Mr. Danver seemed to be something that lived in the consciousness of most English-speaking people. And even if it had a different name, the descriptions they gave were exactly the same. Tall, suited, pale, wispy hair, sharp teeth, black eyes. The description was universal, and the idea that I wasn't alone didn't make me feel any better. If you too have experienced Mr. Danver, then it's already too late. One day you'll tell your kids. One day they will have the knowledge. One day, if they're lucky enough to avoid the icy grip of Mr. Danver, they'll pass it on. The cycle always continues, whether you want it to or not. One day, I too will infect my child with the looming specter of Mr. Danver. Uh-oh. Looks like you've got some company. Hope you didn't intend to go anywhere for a while, because I can tell you from experience, that one there sticks in for the long haul. In this age of telemarketers and ghost calls, we've all got some weird numbers before, but I doubt any of you have gotten one as weird as this. So, if you see this caller, be sure to pick up. You never know what secrets you might learn from a no name, no number. I work in a hospital call center. It's not great work, but it pays the bills. Though you may not think it, you get a lot of calls during the 8-hour shift you work. Usually it's just people trying to find a relative who might be in there, someone trying to schedule an appointment and surgery, maybe even someone seeking medical advice. I'm apparently not qualified to do any of those things, so the job became a lot of telling people, "1 moment please while I transfer you." Then you send them off to their desired department, or not, and you get to talk to them again, except less polite this time. You get a lot of angry people too, most looking for billing, or maybe because they got charged for a hospital service they didn't receive. Those people are best sent off as quickly as possible, before they can get a good head of steam going. There are 4 to 6 of us in the department at any given time. It's mostly college kids trying to pay their bills, or older people looking for a little extra on top of their Social Security. All in all, I think around 10 of us work the switchboard, and you get to know your coworkers pretty well, especially when there's so few of you. We also take turns working the midnight shift, most of us working the day or the mid shift primarily, and at the end of the month, we all walk away with a nice chunk of overtime for our troubles. People being people, there's always 12 or 16 hours of overtime a month. No one minds much. The job's pretty easy, and I liked having a job where I could finish my schoolwork or play on my phone for 8 to 16 hours and still get paid. That was before the heavy breather. Not a week went by where he didn't get at least one notation in the logbook. The notations were supposed to be for strange or unusual calls. For the last few months, most of the entries have been a heavy breather. We had named the caller because their calls were all pretty much the same. You'd pick up the phone and hear the telltale heavy breathing on the other end and know what was going on. We all just figured it was some pervert, some lonely sicko trying to get his rocks off to someone on the other end. You'd hang up before he could get his satisfaction and make a note of it in the logbook. I say these things like they were regular occurrences, but in truth I had yet to get the mystery caller. Every other operator had gotten him at least twice, some of them 3 or 4 times, but I had never managed to see what all the fuss was about. I would get my wish a couple of days later, though. 3 days of midnights? My boss just shrugged at me as she sank the pushpin into the bulletin board. She posted our schedules by hand every week, despite the rest of the hospital having access to an electronic payroll system which generated the schedule for them. Martha is old school, though. Probably since she's been here since they pulled her out of the foundation when they broke ground. She's one of the best bosses I've ever had, too. She doesn't like how short-handed we are any more than we do. "Sorry, kid. Roger says he's taking the weekend off to go visit his boyfriend. He's always doing this on such short notice. I swear I'd have fired him on the spot if we weren't so short-handed. Still, all 3 nights? You're the only one with an open schedule, kid. I'll give you next weekend off if you want it. Scout's honor." Martha made the promise so freely that I took her up on it in a heartbeat. The promise from Martha was worth its weight in gold. She couldn't possibly have known that this would likely be the last weekend I'd ever sit behind that desk. Friday night went pretty normally. I arrived at 11 p.m., brewed a thermos of coffee, and got to my desk around 11:15. Jordan and Aiden were there, finishing up their calls and cleaning up their stations as they waited for midnight. We chatted a little as I logged on, discussing call volume and talking about tonight's call-in schedule. Apparently, there was a team I needed to call in at 4 a.m. for a 5 a.m. case, and they added that the heavy breather had been calling a lot today. They don't say anything, they just keep calling about once an hour, like they're looking for someone. Pam swears she heard them say a name before they hung up, but Pam likes to make stuff up for attention. I got a little excited when Jordan told me that. If they were calling more often, then maybe I'd get to talk to them. I know it's weird to hope that a crazy person will call up and breathe on the phone, but I really wanted to experience it. I felt like it would make me like everyone else, and I was a little sore that I hadn't gotten him yet. I would get my wish about an hour later. It was about 12:30 when they called. I was sitting in the call center basement, sipping coffee and checking Reddit on my phone, when I heard the computer chirp and inform me that I had a call. It was from an unlisted number, not that uncommon, so I picked it up without thinking much about it. When I picked it up, it sounded like someone was sitting too close to a fan. The blowing was annoying, but I was a professional, and I tried to power through it. Southwest Medical Center, how may I help you? The noise on the other end sounded different slightly. I realized all at once that it was rain coming down hard on a window somewhere. Was it raining outside? It hadn't been when I came in. There hadn't been a cloud in the sky, actually. The rain covered it slightly, but as I sat in silence, I began to hear the deep breathing on the other end. There he was. There was the weird caller. Hello, Southwest Medical, can I help you? The breathing persisted, overtopped by the rain that hit hard on the window of wherever they were. I reached for the book to start scribbling down the usual message when I heard something over the phone. I heard a voice. Sorry? I asked, taken aback a little. It's always dark here. The pen fell out of my hand. No one had ever heard this person talk. It was always just heavy breathing for a couple of minutes before they hung up. Had they been waiting for something? I wondered for a moment if they'd talked before and maybe no one had told me. Was I the first one they'd ever talked to? It's always dark here, they repeated, and this time I stopped thinking and started listening. Where are you? I asked, not sure what else to say. The rain is so loud tonight. The voice was neither male or female and sounded low and growly, like someone getting over a cold. Look, I'm not sure who you are, but you've called a hospital. If you need some help, I'll be happy to help you, but otherwise, I need to... Cherish says hi, the voice whispered. That made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I had a sister named Cherish. She was about 12, and as far as I knew, she was asleep at my parents' house. I shook off my fear and began to become a little angry. Whoever this was, they were obviously having a laugh on my account, and it really wasn't funny. Who is this? Roger, is this you? I swear to God, I'm going to HR if this is you. This isn't even a little bit funny. You need to stop. That's when the line went dead. I held the phone against my ear for a few more seconds before putting it in the cradle and looking around nervously. I expected Roger or maybe Jordan to pop out of the break room with their cell phone, laughing because they'd spooked me. All the company I got, though, was the sound of the air conditioner cycling overhead. I sat for a few more minutes, drumming my fingers, trying to forget the call. The more I thought about it, the weirder it got, though. My coworkers would have called back to make fun of me if this was a prank. If it wasn't them, then some stranger on the phone had called up and said my sister's name. Coincidence or not, I needed to be sure. My mom picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear Dad grumbling in the background. Hello? Mom, hey, sorry, is Cherish okay? I know that's a weird question, but I could hear her sitting up in bed. Are you okay? You sound upset. Just please, answer me, Mom. Is Cherish okay? I don't know, hun. She's at sleepaway camp this week. My blood ran cold. I need you to call down there and make sure she's okay. What's all this about? She said groggily. I got a weird phone call a minute ago, and now I have to make sure she's okay. My phone rang, and I looked at the number. Unknown name, unknown number. It couldn't be them again. Mom, I need to call you back. Just promise me that you'll call the camp and make sure she's okay. Mom said she would, and I hung up and picked up the incoming call. I was immediately bombarded by the sound of rain on glass and muffled heavy breathing. The caller's voice sounded watery, slurry, like they'd recently choked on some water. They sounded like someone with a sore throat or a bad case of pneumonia. Like a drowned person. Hello? Hello? Who is this? Cherish needs your help. I gritted my teeth and tried not to scream into the phone. Whoever this is, you need to stop. I'm not amused. You're not funny. I want you to... He's gone to get her. She thinks he's her friend, but he isn't. He wants to hurt her. You have to stop him. Who's gone to get her? The woodsman. He's a bad man. He wants your sister. I didn't have the slightest idea who this person was talking about, but whatever their game was, I was starting to get freaked out. Look, this isn't funny. If this is a joke or something, it's really gone to... The line went dead then, and I was left with static. I spent the next hour in a fitful state. I didn't want to call Mom back and bother her with this, but what if whoever that was wasn't kidding around? Surely my sister wasn't stupid enough to just go off with someone into the woods, right? I didn't know, and that lack of knowledge made me nervous. I began to feel the walls of the basement closing in on me, and the claustrophobic feeling made me shake. When the phone rang again, I caught it on the first ring without even really looking. Hello? I could hear the quaver in my voice. The rain was softer now, but the voice was no less intrusive. He has her! It all but screamed at me, and I thought I could hear someone in the background crying and screaming just under that husky rasp. He's hurting her! Please, hurry! Where are you? I screamed at them, leaning forward as though I could fall into the computer screen. Where has he taken her? If this was a prank, I was buying it, hook, line, and sinker. I could hear someone, a small girl it sounded like, screaming and crying, as someone did God knew what to her. My cell phone roared to life. I looked down to see it was Mom and picked it up without thinking. Mom was hysterical on the other end. She and Dad were in the car, driving up to the camp. The counselors had gone to check on Cherish and found her bed empty. What's more, they found muddy boot tracks going into her cabin, and then leaving out the other way. They can't seem to track them. The rain here, it's been torrential. The state police are bringing in the tracking dogs, and they're going to start as soon as they can. She's in the woods, Mom. Someone has her, I sputtered out, still hearing the screams on the phone. Mom was silent for a few breaths. How do you know that? I've got a caller on the phone who says she's alive, but it sounds like he's hurting her. They're in the woods, Mom. Tell them to search the woods. She hung up on me, and when I picked up the phone, it had gone dead again. I sat in the silence and felt utterly impotent. Should I leave and go help them look? My job wasn't really the thing holding me there. I was sure people would understand if I abandoned my post, but I was hoping that the mystery caller would give me more information. Every second counted now. If my information would help them find my sister a little quicker, then all the better. I muddled through a few late-night calls while I waited, and I'm sure the people on the other end could tell I was tense. After an hour, Mom called to let me know that they'd arrived at the camp. The rain had made it very difficult for the dogs to find a trail, but they'd started searching the woods anyway. The police were confident they could locate her, but Mom wasn't so sure. She sounded scared and tired and just plain defeated. When she hung up, I stared at the phone on my desk and willed the mystery caller to call again. They'd been so chatty before. Why had they gone silent now? I pulled up call logs on my computer then and started trying to find the number. No name, no number was all I ever got. I know in movies the police can easily decode these private numbers, but I work for a hospital and not even the emergency part of the hospital. My resources were limited to what I could do on my out-of-date computer. When the phone rang 20 minutes later, I looked at the number and almost knocked it off the desk in my haste. No name, no number. Hello? Hello? Where are you? I need you to... He's killing her! He's trying to make it last, but he's killing her! The voice whispered harshly. Where are you? The police are looking for her, but I need to know where you are. The voice was silent for a moment, and I thought I'd lost them again. On the other end, I could hear whimpers, and the person making those noises sounded broken. Hot tears ran down my face as I listened to what could be my sister's final moments. I began to beg the voice to tell me where they were. I lay my hands against the desk and cried, letting the tears flow as the voice seemed to contemplate how to answer me. When I played here, It was about a mile from the camp, over a creek, past the blackberry fields, and up a little hill. His house is at the top of that hill. I've been here for so long, though. I don't know if any of those things are still here. Please hurry. She doesn't have much longer." Then the line went dead. I called my mom and gave her the information. When she relayed it to the counselor, they knew exactly where she was talking about. The house belonged to the groundskeeper, and he had lived there for quite a long time. She said the police were on their way now to check it out, and she asked me to thank the person on the phone if they called back. I waited for an hour, another long and agonizing hour, and when my cell phone rang, the number made my skin crawl. Unknown name, unknown caller. Were they calling my cell phone this time? That seemed unlikely, and when I picked it up, I was greeted not by the raspy voice of the sick child, but by the stony voice of Officer Darraway from the state police. He told me they'd found Cherish and the groundskeeper in his cabin. "She ain't in a good way. The bastard used the time he had to do some pretty upsetting things. She's alive, and we're sending her on the next flight to the nearest hospital. That's the one you work at, I believe." I thanked him and told him to tell my parents that I'd be waiting for her when she got here. "Your mama tells me you've been in contact with another child, and they gave you directions to find your sister." "Yes, she just called me out of the blue. I don't even know how she got my number." He was silent for a moment. "You'll forgive me for saying so, but that seems highly unlikely." "How do you mean?" I said, startled. "The groundskeeper didn't have a phone in his cabin. His cell phone was on his person when we recovered him, and there's no other child in that cabin." That's impossible. They said they'd been there for a very long time. They've been calling for weeks." "Look, I appreciate you helping us find your sister, but this whole story seems very far-fetched. That being said, I don't think we'd have found your sister without your help. I want to take a statement from you when I get there, but just know we don't consider you in any way connected to this, despite the oddness of your claim." I thanked him, and he thanked me before hanging up. I was getting ready to call Marta, the 6 a.m. person, so she could come in a little early to relieve me, when a familiar caller popped up on my screen. No name, no number. I picked it up as I prepared to thank the caller for their help. I had just started thanking them when I heard the heavy breathing on the other end, and stopped. The sound was completely different. The caller had a husky tone to his breath, and you could clearly hear their breathing jagged up and down as they went about whatever they were doing. This was no child's breathing. This was an adult, and I hung up the call before I could think too much about it. I sat there in a daze as I pulled the call log towards me. I logged the heavy breather, but thought for a moment about recording the other caller too. They had saved my sister's life, whoever they had been, and I decided not to add them to the log. I called Marta and told her what had happened. She agreed to come in for me and said she'd see me soon before hanging up. I'm sitting with my sister in the ICU as I write this, but I can't help but wonder who that mysterious caller was. How did they call me? How did they know where to find me? My sister is heavily sedated right now, but I'm a little afraid of what she might tell me when she comes to. Does she know the girl who called me? Did she tell her how to contact me? I'm afraid to go back to work now. I'm afraid of who else might call me when I again man that desk. What other lost souls might be just a phone call away. Warm fire, warm ball of fur on your lap, nice warm couch underneath you. These are the good times. The times we look forward to, when times maybe aren't so great. I've certainly played my share of hide-and-seek when I was a kid, and this next one is actually about a time I played hide-and-seek. This is one of those rare stories that I swear before God is true, though maybe it is embellished a little, but that's only thanks to the mind of the child that I was. So, I can tell you from experience that if anyone asks you to play hide-and-seek in the Martin house, it might be best to say no. They call it the Martin house, and it's easily the most haunted place in town. During the day, It's a beautiful two-story estate in the Millville area. It sits behind a high gate overlooking the bay on 10 acres, which comes at a premium given the land's cost inside of Panama City. The current owner keeps up the grounds, maintains the home, but they say he will not live in the house or be there after night. He rents it out for parties and events, lets people picnic on the grounds, opens it during the day for tours and historic outings. But an hour before sunset, the gates are locked, and the place is cleared of people. It's a beautiful place, but they say that the devil walks there after dark. The local legend says that Mr. Martin suspected his wife was having an illicit affair with a servant. They say that in a fit of jealousy, he made her watch as he hung him, later hanging his wife and kids and himself from the same large tree in the front yard. They say you can hear voices, screams, and all kinds of odd noises there after dark. They say people have seen figures in the windows and on the grounds near sunset, with black eyes and pale faces. They say you can see lights come on and off in the house after dark, and it's best avoided once the sun goes down. They say a lot of things, but as a writer of dark fiction, I don't put a lot of stock in local legends. I don't believe in Billy Bowlegs. I don't believe in Kissing Mary. And I don't believe in the hitchhikers they say you can pick up by the West Bay Bridge. The Martin House, however, is something I do believe in, because when I was young, I experienced it firsthand. It was 1993 or 94 when it happened, and I was about 7 or 8. My mother had worked at the same hospital for years, and that hospital had chosen to do their employee appreciation picnic on the grounds of the Martin House. I have to believe they were aware of the dark history of the place, but like I said, nothing ever happened during the day, so they weren't worried. The yard was huge, and the Human Resource Department set up games and tents and all kinds of other things to entertain the kids while their parents socialized. I fell in with a couple of kids that I knew, and we played some games and explored the booths, but ultimately got a little bored with the scheduled events. These were kids that I didn't know well, but we all knew each other in that way that you know someone after spending years upon years going to these sorts of scheduled events with them. One of them was the son of my mom's friend. Another one was a kid I actually went to school with, but didn't really pal around with outside of things like this. Another one was just a kid who would wander up and fall back in with us when we all got together. There were about 7 of us that day, the rest of them just falling in with a group of kids to play games, and I can't remember who suggested that we play hide and seek. It was unanimously agreed upon, but after playing on the lawn for a few rounds, it became a little dull. When someone suggested that we could play in the house, that sounded like a much better idea. So we went inside, but quickly discovered the problem with playing indoors. The house was kind of a museum, and adults didn't really like it when kids were running around things that could be broken. We tried for a couple of rounds, but after being yelled at by a lady in a dress, we thought we might have to go back outside. That was when we saw the kid on the stairs. Like I said, none of us really knew each other, but none of us had ever seen this kid. He was youngish, probably 5 or 6, and he didn't really say anything. He just sort of stared at us through the slats on the staircase, and I'll remember the way he looked at us for my entire life. He seemed both fascinated by our appearance and utterly terrified at our game. He looked at us the way I looked at the dog sometimes, when he was making noise while my dad was trying to nap. He looked like he thought we might wake up a parent that would be angry. Someone suggested that maybe we could go play upstairs, and we all thought that might be a good idea. The upstairs was usually blocked off, but if that kid was up there, then the door must be unlocked. None of us had ever gone upstairs. It was locked, like I said, but We found the door was open, so we all went up. The upstairs was about the same size as the downstairs, but we saw a ladder going up into the attic, and thought that would make the best place for hide and seek. It would be dark up there, probably with stuff to hide behind, and it would be spooky. What we found was a pretty big attic with boxes and furniture covered in sheets. It was dusty and cobwebby, and reminded me of the opening of one of my favorite shows, Are You Afraid of the Dark? We decided who was going to be it, then we all went to hide. It was dusty in the attic, and a few of us got found right away when we started sneezing. I expected that we might see the kid we had seen earlier, but there was never any sign of him. I didn't think much about it. Kids rarely question things that don't come from adults. And as we played, the volume of our game became louder and louder. We began to scream with joy every time someone was found, and some of them had taken to scaring each other instead of just playing hide and seek. I'm sure that some of the people from downstairs could hear us, but given that we were 2 floors up, we might have been mistaken for just regular noise. I was hiding behind a vanity near the back of the attic, peeking out from around the edge of the sheet, when I heard a little voice in my ear that scared the crap out of me. It scared me because up until then, I'd been the only person hiding behind the vanity. You guys shouldn't be here. You're gonna wake up Daddy, and he'll be mad." I turned around, and there he was. He was crouched down behind the vanity, looking at me with these big, sad, scared eyes. And now that I was closer, I could see he was dressed in suspenders and a grubby-looking white shirt. His feet were bare, and his hair looked like someone had cut it with a bowl. I asked him who he was, but he shook his head and put a finger to his lips as he made a shushing sound. "Shh. You're gonna wake up Daddy, and he's gonna be mad." I started to ask him who he was talking about, when all of a sudden, we heard loud footsteps coming up the stairs. Someone was yelling, but it wasn't regular yelling. Usually when my dad yelled, there were swear words in it or some kind of direction. This yelling was just babbling, like an angry beehive or a car when it needs an oil change. It was angry, and it was loud, but there really wasn't any substance to it. The game quieted down as we all became the hiders. We knew that we shouldn't be here. We all knew that if we were found, we'd be in trouble. So we all took to hiding as someone came very angrily up the ladder. I could see the others as they hunkered around the other covered piece of furniture and storage boxes. They all looked scared, but they also looked excited. This was a different level to the game, something a little scarier. We all knew that this was the real game, and we had to win, or we might never be allowed to come back again. Through the white, oiling up out of the square hole, came a large something. It was man-shaped, but maybe not a person. It had arms and legs. I could see a head, but the rest of it seemed to just be shadows. It was like someone standing in total darkness, and I think even then I suspected that this was no museum curator coming after noisy children. The hairs on the back of my neck began to stand up, and as the thing started looking for us, I turned and found the little boy was gone. The other kids seemed to have felt it too, and as the thing moved towards the left side of the attic, we all started shuffling to the right. It knocked over a box and kept yelling in that strange, barely coherent way. It didn't seem unfamiliar with the attic, and I wondered if it was up here looking for us, or if it was looking for the little boy who'd been a stranger to me. Either way, we made our way back to the ladder and started quietly going down onto the second floor. We were almost all down when the thing turned and looked at the 2 or 3 of us that were left. He didn't have eyes, at least none that I could see, but I felt very seen by it, and the last of us went down in a herky-jerky pile of bodies. We ran back to the staircase, and that's when someone else found us. We burst through the door that led out onto the stairwell, and almost knocked over a lady with a tour guide name badge. She blinked at us and did not seem at all happy to see 7 or 8 kids coming out of a restricted area. She asked what we thought we were doing in there, and we told her that we thought it was open. She said no, the door was always locked, and told us we better get out of there before we got in trouble. When she asked how many of us there were, that's when we seemed to disagree. Some of us said 7, but a few of us insisted that there were 8. No, there was only 7 of us. Remember, that's why we didn't play Capture the Flag. Yeah, but then the other kid joined us, so we had 8. What other kid? There was only ever 7 of us. The kid in the suspenders. He was playing in the attic with us. At that point, the lady was completely frazzled and collected up all of us and brought us downstairs to have a talk with our parents. In the meantime, she had a few of the other people search the second floor and the attic for a missing kid. Most of our parents were not terribly pleased about being drug away from the festivities because their kids couldn't behave, and we got an earful as we stood in the foyer of the Martin house. Some of us, me included, were more worried about the missing kid than getting into trouble. I can't speak for everyone, but I'd seen how scared he was. I don't know who he was afraid of, but I was afraid that whatever that thing had been, it had got him. As my dad let me have it for acting out, my eyes started to wander. I was looking at the pictures on the wall, the ones showing the Martin house through the years, before they finally settled on a very familiar face. The kid looked less scared and more confused, but it was definitely him, standing on the front lawn with 2 other kids and his parents. The house behind him looked a little different, but it was definitely the one we were standing in right now. Hey, that's him, I said, interrupting my dad in the middle of his lecture. Who's him? My dad asked, not appreciating being interrupted. That's the kid, the one I saw in the attic. The lady who had found us looked at the picture before shaking her head and telling me not to tell lies. No, really, I assured her. That's him. He was hiding with us. He told me that we were going to wake his daddy up. He looked really scared. My parents didn't believe me, but I've seen that picture since, and I know now that that little boy is one of the Martin brood. He was one of the kids who allegedly hung from the tree in the front yard, and I would have bet you anything that was his spirit we saw. The big shadowy thing didn't look at all like Mr. Martin, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. The kid didn't have black eyes like all the other stories tell, but maybe that's something that comes a little later. I've encountered a lot of strange things in my life, but that was one of my earliest scrapes with the paranormal. As of writing this, the Martin house still sits in the same spot. They've completely closed off the inside these days, and after that year, the hospital started doing their employee appreciation somewhere else. I don't know if it was the house itself, or because they got a better deal somewhere else, but I never went back to the Martin house again. That's always such a strange story to come back to. I always have to question myself. Did it happen, or was it something that I misremember? We have so many of those within our heads. Ghost memories. Memories sprinkled with the fine sugar of childhood. Memories that may or may not be true, or may have all been about interpretation. Speaking of, our next story also takes place in that magical land of childhood, though the one telling the story is far from in on that sugarier aspect. So, let's investigate the local playground and find the strange graffiti that tells you, "I miss you, Daddy." I can't explain it, but he's been here the whole time. No one believed me. My wife thought I was insane, but he's been here the whole time. My son, Dale, was 5 when he went missing. We were at the park by our flat when it happened. Park may be too grand a word for it, but that's what Dale always called it. In reality, it was a big plastic play structure, with a couple of slides, a climbing wall, and a sand pit. The whole thing is surrounded by a 15 by 15 fence, with a couple of benches for parents to sit on inside. That's where I sat that day, scrolling through Reddit and finishing my cigarette. Dale was playing with a couple of neighborhood kids, their parents sitting on the other benches, so they didn't have to breathe in my smoke. I looked up in time to see him go beneath the play structure, into an area they call the cave. The cave is an enclosed area beneath the structure, with a roof that was comfortably close for a kid and downright claustrophobic for an adult. I heard my phone chirp and looked back down to see a text from my wife. She'd gotten home from work and wanted Dale and me to come help with the groceries. I pitched my cigarette over the fence and called for Dale. "Come on, Dale. Mom's waiting for us." No response. "Come on, Dale. If you can't listen, we won't be able to come back tomorrow." Usually this would have brought him running. Playing outside was his favorite pastime, but there was still no answer. Both of his playmates came out the other side, giggling and laughing as they acted out whatever game they were playing, and I asked if they'd seen Dale. Alicia, a dark-haired girl who was missing her front teeth, lisped, "He's still in the cave, Mr. Darwith." So, I hunkered my nearly 6-foot frame, looked into the dark underbelly of the play structure, and called for Dale to come out. "Come on, Dale, we really have to go. Mom's waiting on us." I still didn't think anything was amiss, other than Dale trying to squeeze in a few more minutes of playtime. I expected him to giggle and poke his head out, baiting me into chasing him or crawling into the cave. He knew that as big as I was, it would be funny to watch me try to get under the structure and run him out, a game we played often. Instead, there was only silence. So I sighed and hunkered down on the damp sand to crawl under to get him. I heard the other two parents chuckle as they watched me, my back scraping at the bottom of the structure as I crawled towards the entrance to the cave. I didn't mind playing with Dale, but this was a little much. I was tired from my night shift the day before, and my back was sore from lifting freight all night. I resigned myself to having a stern talking to with him on the way home about not listening and crawled into the dark opening of the cave. As I passed from the lighted world outside, the afternoon sun cut slants across my face through the boards of the structure as I entered the darkness of the cave. I felt a crawling sensation on my neck suddenly. Thought I might have picked up a spider, and I ran a hand over to knock him off. There was nothing there, but the feeling wouldn't abate. It felt like my hackles were up, that ancient feeling of predators nearby putting me on edge, and it took everything I had to keep dragging myself through the space. It was only about 5 feet of blackness, but the space was preternaturally dark. It was the weirdest I had felt in years. Was it always this dark in here? I'd crawled through here before, but I didn't remember it being this black. Worse still, I didn't feel like I was alone in here. Of course I'm not alone, I reminded myself. I came in here to get Dale. As I crawled through, I began to doubt that he was still in here, and the sense that something else lived here wouldn't so easily be put aside. I felt like something hateful lived here, something that was even now hungry and slobbering. My goal went from getting Dale to getting the hell out of the space, and I came out the other side, expecting to be dragged back and consumed any minute. I stood up, wiping the dirt off my knees, as the air puffed out of me loudly. It could have easily been mistaken for exertion, but I'd be a fool to pretend it was anything but fear. I expected my son to pop out and laugh at his silly old dad then, but he was still nowhere to be found. "Dale?" I called, my voice becoming fearful after what I'd experienced. "Dale!" The other parents looked up, hearing the jagged quality of my voice, and rose to see if everything was okay. I can't find my son," I told them, and they told me not to panic as we searched the structure. My wife came walking up just as I started getting frantic, and she must have sensed my concern as she caught sight of me. She called the police then, and as I ran to check the woods, I heard her say that hateful phrase for the first time. "Our son's gone missing. Please send help." Half an hour later, 2 cars pulled up and a couple of officers came to render assistance. I had searched behind the flats, in the scraggy woods nearby, around the little retention pond that I always told Dale to keep away from, and was just about to start knocking on doors when I saw them. They wanted to talk to me being the last to see Dale, and the officer in charge sent 2 of his men to check nearby houses as they asked me questions for the next few minutes. Where had I seen him? What was he wearing? Was there anyone suspicious around? Who were his mates? Where might he have gone off to? Did he run away often? And all the time they assured me that they would find him, and not to panic. I answered their questions honestly, but I knew that he couldn't have left the play park. Dale was small for his age. I told them so, and despite all my misgivings with the flat we lived in, they had done one thing that I thanked them for. The clasp on the gate was too heavy for a little tyke to push up. Dale had struggled with it before, but I knew he couldn't have left without help. The other parents said they hadn't seen him come out or seen anyone lurking around the playground that day. So the police searched. They searched the play park, the surrounding flats, the woods, and the whole area, basically retreading the ground I had already walked. As night began to fall, they called in more officers and began to canvass the wider area. My wife and I were distraught. Dale was our first and only child, but as the day stretched on, it seemed less and less likely that they would find him. I'm not ashamed to say that I took Dale's disappearance poorly. My wife was stoic through it all, but I knew she was hurting. He was her baby, and she had carried him for 9 months, but I think she held a lot of her sorrow in because she saw me floundering. I became like a ghost in my own home. Eventually I went back to work, but my performance suffered. It only takes a little effort to load things onto a truck, but I was falling behind, missing quotas, and making trucks late. The supervisor was a mate from primary school, fortunately for me, and he saw that I wasn't doing well. He suggested counseling and told me it might help, but I didn't want to tell some stranger about my problems. A year passed, my wife and I growing distant as the days went by, and as the anniversary of Dale's disappearance drew closer, I finally really screwed things up at work. I can't even say that it wasn't my fault, because it absolutely was. I was operating a lift, something I'd done since I got certified at 19, and as I backed out with a load, I hit a riser. It wasn't a hard hit, just a bump really, but the legs on that particular riser, as it turned out, were getting ready to give way. The riser collapsed in spectacular fashion, and when it fell on one of my co-workers. He lived. They managed to get the pallets off of him before they crushed him, but it broke his collarbone, and he had to be hospitalized. My supervisor was furious, but I could tell he was trying to hold back in the face of my sincere grief. "I'm recommending you take a couple of weeks unpaid leave. If it were anyone else, I'd hand them their walking papers here and now, but I know you need help more than you need a trip to the unemployment line. Take these 2 weeks, sort your life out, and return to work. If this happens again, mate, I ain't gonna have a choice." I couldn't look at him. His pity was worse than his anger, and I knew I needed to do something. I nodded, mumbling a thank you, and he showed me out of his office. I walked around for the rest of the night, trying to figure out what I was going to tell my wife, and finding nothing. She would be mad, probably mad enough to push her to leave me, but as the sun started to peek over the horizon, I knew there wasn't much else I could do. She was just as mad as I'd thought she'd be, but her pity was just as hard to look at as my supervisor's had been. He's gone. Dale is gone, and making yourself a martyr over it won't change the fact. You still have insurance. Get some counseling. Figure this out. I need you back. Not just back at work, but back here. I miss him too, but digging into these wounds won't make it any better. Get some help, for both our sakes. There was something unsaid beneath that statement, and I understood it, but wasn't sure what to do about it. I spent the next 4 days in a blackout state. I had found my therapy at the bottom of a bottle, something I had avoided up to that point. With no job to go to, I just stayed at home and drank my pain away. My wife's patience finally ran out. After 2 days of watching me hunker on the couch like a sot, she told me she was going to see her mother for a few days, and suggested I sort myself out while she was gone. If I come home and you're still like this, I can't promise I'll be back for long. Once she was gone, I spent most of my day in a fermented haze. That's how, on the 5th day, I found myself buzzed and sitting on the same bench I had been on when I told Dale we needed to leave. It was early afternoon, and the play park was empty, thank God. It wasn't the first time I had just come to sit here, and the other parents often found excuses to leave with their kids when I came to wallow in my grief. I was the sad father who came back to the place he'd suffered most, and I really hoped the park had been empty when I got here. Even in my current state, I didn't want anyone to see me like this. It was embarrassing, and it might frighten some of the children if I came weaving into the park smelling like a distillery. I was staring at the play structure, thinking to myself that it might be time to get some help after all. When I first saw it, it was just 8 words, but those 8 words sobered me up faster than any cold shower ever could. On the side of the slide, in rough marker, someone had written, "Where have you gone, Daddy? I miss you." I just sat there, staring for what felt like an eternity, and as the tears came, the alcohol came up as well. My tears fell nakedly into the pile of sick that sat between my legs, and as the rage bubbled up in me, it felt like they were almost burned away. Someone was mocking me, mocking my son's loss, and as I staggered towards the super's office, I was madder than I had any right to be. Mr. Vidner, the super for the complex, always reminded me of one of the hobbits from The Lord of the Rings. He was short, fat, had a curly brown ring of hair around the bald spot on his crown that got bigger every year, and when he sat at his desk, it was like a child sitting in his father's chair. He nearly fell out of that chair when I slammed his office door, his expression of confused anger becoming one of confused fear as he looked on my face. He was a small man, and the sight of a large, angry drunk in his office reminded him of his stature rather quickly. "Someone has written hateful graffiti on your play park, and I want to know what you intend to do about it." He took a minute or two to collect his thoughts before asking what the hell I was talking about. I took him out to have a look, leading him to the slide in question, and he looked taken aback as he read the words. "Who would do such a thing?" he asked, more to himself than anyone. The way he side-eyed me, I could tell he thought I might have done it myself, but one look at my face made him rethink it before he said it. "I'll take care of it immediately, Mr. Dawes. In the meantime, why don't you go get some rest? You look under the weather." He had the decency not to call me a drunk out in the open, and I conceded the matter as I went home to sober up a little. As night began to fall, some undetermined amount of time later, I sat up from the couch and listened to the 5 or 6 stout cans rattle angrily to the floor. By the headache and the mealy taste in my mouth, I had not gone home and sobered up. As I moved into the kitchen to make something for dinner, I remembered the words on the slide and felt angry all over again. As the meat pie I had taken out of the freezer spun in the microwave, I wondered if Vidner had taken care of it like he said he would. I wondered if he'd painted over it or washed it away or how he had done it. Were the words still sitting there on that slide? As the microwave dinged, I resolved to go find out, and took my pie and plastic fork on a little field trip. I watched the steam roll off the top as I walked down to the little park, the night air alive with crickets and night birds. It would have been pretty if I hadn't been in such despair. The trees were losing their autumn leaves, becoming bare and skeletal, and the air was crisp enough to make my undershirt unadvisable. My bare feet slapped at the concrete as I walked away from my flat, and the closer I got, the better the view of the offending slide. The words were gone, the pressure washer having left the slide a little lighter for its effort, but as I came through the gate, I saw that something else had been added to the side of the structure. It looked like the same marker strokes, the handwriting big and childish, and as I read it, I felt a growl rumble in my throat. I saw you today, Daddy. I saw you, but you didn't see me. I looked around as the wind rattled the nearby tree, expecting to see a group of snickering youths as they watched me. This had teenagers written all over it, and as the pie slipped out of my hand, I loosed my shout at the sky. Why? Why did they devil me like this? Was this a game to them? When I was a kid, we would never have done something like this to anyone, let alone a grieving father. The dark offered up no answers, but the side of the play park did when I turned back. Beneath the first message, another, smaller message was written in the same childish scrawl. The longer I looked at it, the more I recognized it. How many times had I watched my son scribble words in his reader just that way, filling in the workbook pages in big, looping script as he prepared to go to kindergarten. Daddy, I can see you, but you can't see me. Please help me. It's scary here. I hunkered on my knees in the sand, looking at the words as I ran my fingers over them. They looked just like his, and as I felt a splinter catch in the pad of my thumb, I pulled it back sharply. There was no way he could be here. There was no way that he could have been hiding here for a year. But as I watched the playset, I had no doubt that he had written those words. Dale, I said, my voice quavery as I glanced into the shadowy depths of the playground. Dale, I shouted a little louder, casting around as I tried to find him. I walked around to the other side, stumbling in the gritty sand as it sucked at my feet. My head was full of rails, and my words slurred even to my own ears. There were doubtlessly people looking down through their curtains at me as I capered like a sot drunk, but I didn't care. My boy was here. He was here somewhere, and I needed to find him. I tripped then, going face down in the sand, and when I came up, I saw a new message on the wet-looking plasterwood. It was hard to see in the shadows that I sat in, but as I got closer, I put my trembling fingers on it to make sure it was real. My fingers came away tacky, the tips black as if they had touched wet marker. I need you to come get me, Daddy. I'm stuck in the sad swamps, and I need help. Excuse me, sir. Everything all right here? As their flashlights hit me, I squinted, but the words were like a brand across my eyes. The sad swamps was what Dale called the swamps of sorrow from his favorite movie, The Never-Ending Story. We had watched it about 1,000 times, and when the VHS that I had owned as a kid finally broke in the VCR, we had searched for it on DVD until we found it at a local thrift store. He watched it every day before his afternoon nap, and I imagined that he could just about quote it word for word. Seeing the words sad swamps made me certain that it was Dale talking. But how? How could he be talking to me from... The light was right in my face now, and I pulled up a hand to block it. Some of your neighbors were worried. You were faring poorly, Mr. Dawes. They heard you shouting and wanted us to come check on you. They were being kind. It seemed that everyone was being kind these days to poor old drunk Mr. Dawes. But I didn't have time for them. I'd seen something under the edge of the play park, half a word that was buried in the shadows. It was his latest message, and as I staggered towards it a little, I hoped it would tell me how to get to him. What happened? One of them asked in his jovial tone as he leaned down. Why flock you out after you came home snookered? Well, we can get you a place to sleep it off, sir. Never... He had put a hand on my shoulder, but I pulled away from him as I tried to see the words that were written beneath the structure. It was just 6 words, but I couldn't see the last one, and the last one seemed very important. The police grabbed a hold of me, but I fought to get away as I tried to see that last word. I got as close as I could, both catching me under an arm as they pulled me away from the structure, and finally I saw it. I repeated it again and again as they put me in the back of the car, all the fight out of me now, wanting to commit it to memory before my drink-addled brain made a muck of it. "We'll phone the missus and let her know that she can pick you up in the tank, Mr. Dawes. If she don't wanna, then I guess you're sobering up on a bench for the night, so long as you don't try any more of that." I ignored them as we left the parking lot, my flat disappearing behind us as I repeated those 6 words like a mantra. Look for me inside the cave. The police hadn't been wrong. My wife was livid. She came down to the station, her clothes clearly thrown on hastily, and glowered at me through the bars of the holding cell. It was just me in there with a few old gaffers, and they were snoring in a corner as I slouched on the bench. I was still imprinting those words on my brain, mumbling them like a magic spell, when I heard her voice and looked up into her scowling face. "I can't believe you've done this. It isn't enough that you get sent home from work, that you do nothing but blunder around like an old tramp, and that you won't get any help for yourself. But now you go and get yourself tossed in the drunk tank. I'm done, Malcolm. Do you understand me? This is the last straw. I won't stay here and watch you destroy yourself." "He's alive," I rasped out, and when she looked back at me, I saw all the anger leak out of her, only to be replaced with pity. "I miss him too, just as much as you do, but you have to let him go. It's been a year, Malcolm. He's not coming home. It wasn't your fault what happened to him. You have to stop blaming yourself for this. He's been leaving me messages at the play park, Stephanie. I can prove it. Come with me and I'll show you. We can find him. We can be a family again. We can—" But she cut me off with the first sob I'd heard from her in months. "I'm leaving, Malcolm. When they release you in the morning, don't call me. Go back to the flat. Go to your mother's house. Go to hell for all I care. I can't watch you do this anymore." She left me there with the other drunks, but I'd already decided what I had to do. They turned me loose in the morning, and after a brisk walk home, I got the things I'd need. I brought a torch, some string, and a big hunting knife I'd had since I was a teenager, and set off for the play park. It was early morning, and I had the place to myself, save for the pigeons still gobbling at my spilled pie remains. I didn't see any new graffiti, but I didn't need any. I knew where Dale was, and as I got on my hands and knees, I crawled around the playground and into the cave. Even in my assuredness, I felt foolish as I moved into the cave. It was dark, but I could still see the light streaming in from the other side. I didn't feel that same sense of foreboding like I had before. No sense of monsters coming to gobble me up, and I turned on the torch as I checked out the corners. The cave was a box of 4 walls with a roof of thick plastic overhead, and I should have been able to see all 4 walls. 3 of the walls were normal enough, but as I looked to the west-facing wall, I was aware of another opening that led into a space that shouldn't exist. An opening between that led into deeper darkness. As my torch turned against the encroaching blackness, I turned my body in a ponderous circle and started crawling into it. If I meant to get my son back, I would need to hobble into the sad swamp and come out the other side. In contrast to the dark cave behind me, the space I entered was pitch black. The edges of my light curled oddly, the darkness seeming to retreat around the edges like felt as I moved in deeper. I wasn't underground. I was still heading forward, but given the dimensions of the play structure, the place I crawled shouldn't exist. The length was wrong. The longer I crawled, the more I expected to wake up and find that I had fallen asleep in the drunk tank. The space was cramped, but felt vast as it stretched on. It was like an abandoned underground cave, the claustrophobic passage threatening to collapse on me at any minute. Besides being black dark, it was also utterly silent. Besides the crunch of my knees as they moved over the sand, no other sounds seemed to exist. My own labored breathing seemed to be absorbed by that thick midnight around me, and every painful drag of my body sent a spasm of need through me. It was a primal need, a need to stand at my full height and stretch my arms up, a way to dissipate the confining gloom that hung around me. The same part of my brain made it pretty clear, however, how bad an idea that would be. What if my hands should pass into that darkness and never return? What if the darkness came back with the hand? I kept crawling into that inky soup, wondering if I would simply wander here forever. It was pitch outside the protective beam of my torch, and with every struggling shuffle, I wondered why I didn't turn around and go back. Nothing could survive down here. Nothing could live in this pitch blackness. If I didn't go back now, I'd never find my way out, and be forced to wander endlessly in this void until my torch went out. And then what? I knew I wasn't alone when I heard the soft scuff of feet on sand. I looked into the black expanse, expecting to see the beast that had terrified me the last time I found myself in this nothing. The beam of my torch didn't go very far. At the end of the light, I could hear the scuff of bare feet on sand, though. Something was coming towards me, and I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Would it be my son, or would it be a monster to end my journey? When a dirty, half-starved little boy buried me in a hug that circled my shoulders, I knew I'd found him. "Dale?" I whispered, but he could only nod and cry against me. I didn't waste time or breath. I just scooped him up and didn't stop moving until I was back in the lighted world of the play park. As we moved, I could feel that clawing, penetrating glare from behind me. Something had noticed I was taking its prize, and they were unhappy. I kept crawling, kept pulling, but I could hear those scrabbling feet as they kicked up sand. They were getting closer now, their growl loud and thunderous, and on a whim, I turned my torch on them. Bathed in the light, they yelped wildly and kicked up sand as they backpedaled. I didn't dare look back to see what was tailing me. I put on a burst of speed, crawling like our lives depended on it, and when I collapsed in the light of day, I was aware of people shouting at me to get out of there. Their kids were asking who I was and why I was so dirty, but they must have thought I was a bum. When they saw Dale, they tried to take him from me, but I held on like my life depended on it. And when they finally recognized us, I heard their anger turn to surprise. They took us both to the hospital, and I'm glad to say that aside from being underfed and very dirty, Dale was completely fine. My wife came to the hospital, and we both cried as she apologized for doubting me. I refused it, telling her she had nothing to apologize for. I doubted myself. I fell into the bottle and nearly lost myself in my grief. I should be apologizing to you for putting you through this for the last year. She sat with me at the hospital, both of us afraid to take our eyes off Dale, as he sat placidly in his hospital bed. I asked him about what he had gone through, but he couldn't tell me much. He said that he got lost in the cave, and he crawled and crawled until he came out in the play park again. Only it wasn't his play park. The play park he found was different, and me and his friends were gone. The sky was sort of purple, and the clouds were too thick-looking to be real. I couldn't get the gate open, but that was probably good. There were these big things that would come by like living shadows, and they would look at me like I was an animal in the zoo. I drank some water from a gross puddle, but there was no food. Sometimes I went to sleep in the cave, but I always felt like something was watching me in there. It never tried to hurt me, but it always felt like I was hiding and waiting for someone to catch me. I thought I was going to starve before I heard you breathing in the cave. I had to run away to get away from some shadow people who were looking for me, and I heard you down there and went to see what the sound was. I asked him about the messages, and he said he had found some kind of marker in the sand over there, and that was about the time he started seeing a shadow inside the play park. I knew it was you. Somehow I just knew it was you, but you couldn't see me. So I started writing messages, hoping you would see them. I guess you found them. The strangest part is that Dale swears he was only there for a week. He says he kept going back into the cave, but he only slept a few times while he was away. What's more, the doctors say he doesn't appear to have grown in the time he was gone. His dental records and growth structure are the same as when he had a checkup about a month before he disappeared. I'm glad to have Dale back, but I don't let him play in the cave anymore. We still visit the play park, and I still let him slide on the slides and run on the structure like he used to, but he's forbidden to go underneath anymore. It's a rule he doesn't mind following, lest he get lost in those dark tunnels for a second time. One more story, and then I think it's time to say goodbye yet again. We've all met our fair share of people. At least, I have. I don't know about you. Sometimes, however, you just meet a person, and they feel off. Maybe it's a smell. Maybe it's a feeling. Maybe it's the way they act. Maybe it's all those things. Maybe it's none of them. Maybe it's the last piece of that prehistoric lizard brain that we all keep in the back of our head that warns us about danger right before it sinks its teeth into us. So, you would do well to mark her by her dangerous smile. It all started with a trip to the bar. Some friends had invited me out after work for drinks. Given that we all work at the steel mill in this 2-stoplight rural town, that meant we were going to Dusty's. Dusty's is what's colloquially called a dive bar, but it's the only bar we have in town. It's a little roadhouse where you can drink watered-down beer, listen to country music, put some money in the jukebox, play some pool, or hit on the 7 or 8 half-dead barflies that are there every night. If you go to Dusty's for the atmosphere, then you're going to be disappointed. Most of us went there to watch the guys who worked for the town's only other reliable business, the logging company, drink too much and get in fights with people that are unprepared to stand toe-to-toe with them. That night in question was what you would call a slow night. I'd had about 3 pitchers of cheap beer, and the only fight we had seen was when someone's wife came in to drag him away from whatever tart he was talking to by the stage. Neither of them had been particularly skillful brawlers, and when they finally decided to just beat the crap out of her husband and drag him out of the parking lot, I told the guys I was going to turn in early. It was creeping up on midnight, and the bar was deader than usual. Dude, no way you're going to get a cab this late at night. You might as well stick around. Why wouldn't I be able to get a cab? Sandy's runs till 3 in the morning most nights. Charlie, the guy who had told me I wouldn't get a cab, leaned back on his stool so he could look at me. My cousin Dwayne says the cabs won't come out this far after 10 o'clock. They've been having trouble with people going missing. I rolled my eyes, walking my stool back so I didn't fall off of it. I was drunker than I thought I had been, and I didn't want to fall over in front of my friends. Yeah, I've been hearing those stories since I was a kid. Tell your cousin not to believe everything he reads on the internet. I took a staggering step towards the door, catching the bar with my hand as the room spun a little. Nah, Charlie protested. This is pretty recent. They say that the cabs have been arriving to pick up fares, but when they get there, no one is waiting. It's a big mystery, and no one's really sure what to think of it. I scoffed at him, not really in the mood for any of that. I staggered out of Dusty's, taking out my cell phone as I tried to Google the number for Sandy's. I'd used it often enough that you'd think I could remember it, but in my current state, I couldn't remember much of anything. After 2 or 3 failed attempts, I managed to get the number in and got the receptionist after 3 long rings. Sandy's Cabs, how can I help you? Yeah, I need to get a cab from Dusty's bar. I'd heard the clicking of keys on the other end of the phone, but when she learned my location, she seemed to change her mind. I'm sorry, sir, we don't pick up from Dusty's anymore. I glowered at the phone, not quite sure I had heard her right. What kind of small-town cab company doesn't pick up from the biggest bar in town? How come? I asked. It was deemed too detrimental to our clients. I guess Charlie had been right. Okay, well, where can I catch a cab? There was some furious clicking, and when she came back, she almost seemed to be whispering, as if something might hear her. There's a bus stop down by Richmond. The company has said that it's the closest to Dusty's that will pick up clients. Richmond? It's almost 5 blocks from here. Sorry, sir. If you want a cab, then that's where you'll have to go. I considered just going back inside to wait for the others, but decided I was ready to leave. A walk would probably do me some good anyway. Fine. I'll meet them there in 30 minutes. The dispatcher said that she would dispatch a cab, and then promptly hung up on me. With that out of the way, I began my walk along the shoulder of the rural road. Fortunately, the weather was pretty good for early June. The pine trees on the left side of the road, side I was walking on, made a skittering sound in the wind, and it sent a chill down my spine. The thick swab of pulpwood trees seemed to stretch on for miles, and the farther I walked, the more it felt like something was watching me. It was little more than a tickle on the side of my face, the slight attention of something that I couldn't really see. But the farther I went, the more the regard rankled me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just feeling creeped out after a long walk in the middle of the night. But I heard the pine needles crunching lightly beneath something, and decided to speed up. I tried to convince myself it was just a deer or a fox that I had disturbed up, and it would leave off after it got a sniff of me. They were more afraid of me than I was of them, and once they realized it, they'd take off. The farther I walked, though, the more I thought about the disappearance that Charlie had talked about. I wasn't much for news. I didn't even have a cable subscription, but I was shocked that I hadn't heard anything about these kidnappings or whatever they were. The thought that there might be something watching me from the woods with intentions of making me its next victim made me speed up a little more. I had to stop myself from running as I ate up the road. What would I do when I got to the bus stop if there was no cab there? Would I really be able to just sit in the terminal and wait while whatever was out there kept watching me? I shook the feeling off, feeling silly. It's just a raccoon or a possum or something. Just because it seemed to be going in the same direction I was didn't necessarily mean it had ill intentions. I tried to ignore the soft sound of indignant pine needles as they broke underfoot, but the farther we went, the harder it became. It was just an animal, I told myself. I had just disturbed it in whatever had brought it out tonight, and now it was curious of me. It would go on its way soon. It would leave me alone if I just ignored it. I kept telling myself that, but the further I went, the harder it was to believe. It seemed to be stalking me from behind the dark forest, a predator intent on man-flesh. It looked like some kind of hunting cat, its head boxy and its body sleek and long. It slunk quietly along behind me, plotting its attack as it prepared to spring. That was stupid, I told myself. There was nothing there. I was just making myself paranoid. I was imagining the sound of large, flat paws on pine falls. I was creating the slightly elevated breathing of the animal. If I turned now, I wouldn't see anything but the shadows and the pine trees. I tried to make my head turn, but my neck seemed unwilling. I remembered something that my grandma had said once when I was a kid, and her voice rustled through my mind like a ghost. Some things don't like being seen, and when you see them, you can't take it back. When I saw the lights of the bus stop, I almost broke into a run. I made myself walk, however, because things like that love to chase, too. As I got closer to the bus stop, I became aware of someone sitting in the lighted shell. As I got closer, I could see it was a woman, her head down and her body abnormally still. I wanted to call out to her to warn her about the thing that was following me, but as I moved closer to the stop, I realized it had broken off its chase at some point. I breathed a sigh of relief, laughing at myself for psyching myself up. It had all been in my head after all, and I had never really been in any danger. As I came into the light of the bus stop, I almost laughed, my smile hard to hide. "Something funny?" asked the woman, lifting her head to look at me. My smile soured a little. Her voice sounded strange in the bus shell, and I worried that I might have offended her. "No, it's just I was worried about something, and it appears to have all been in my head. I was mostly laughing at myself for being foolish." I realized now that I was here that she was sitting with her knees against her face, and she had leaned her head against her knees as she turned to look at me. She was a stringy thing, older teens or early 20s, and her hair looked oily as it hung about her face like filthy drapes in a rundown trailer. She was dressed in something that had once been a sack or maybe curtains, and I wondered if she might be homeless. Worst of all, she had a smell about her, a smell that was not altogether pleasant, a smell that reminded me of my grandfather's smokehouse after hunting season, of the remains of animals left behind that smokehouse. "What was it?" she asked, her teeth looking too big in her mouth as she smiled. I was afraid of being stalked by some kind of hunting cat," I said, surprising myself by speaking at all. "A cat? In this part of the world?" She scooted a little closer to me, a minute movement, but too much for me. This part of the world is more accustomed to bears, I hear," she said. As she scooted this time, I scooted away. Like I said, it was just a feeling. "What kind of feeling?" she asked, scooting again, though I couldn't figure out how. Her arms were around her legs, her knees against her cheek, and she seemed to have no means of scooting at all. It was, I stuttered, my mouth suddenly very dry. "It was like being Red Riding Hood while the wolf stalked her." At that moment, I was as sober as I had ever been. Between the creature and the girl, all the drink had been burned out of me, and I suddenly wondered if the creature might have left because it smelled her. Her smile threatened to cut her cheeks. "I imagine that was exhilarating. Did you enjoy feeling like the prey for once? Did your blood demand that you run, but your mind insisted that walking would be safer? Did you know how much I wanted to chase you?" My heart was pounding, loud enough for me to hear it. She had just admitted to being the one that was stalking me. She couldn't have been the thing in the woods. There was no way. She had been here when I arrived. There was no way she could have dogged my heels through the woods and then gotten here before me. It was impossible. My brain told me these things, but I found it harder and harder to believe as she slowly backed me into the side of the bus shell. I wanted to run, but I knew that was what she wanted too. "You thought you'd be safe once you made it to the light, didn't you, manling? Little did you know that monsters don't always shrivel in the light." She was very close now, her legs coming down as she unfurled herself. She was bigger than I had thought, her body thin and long as she pulled herself onto the bench. She was on all fours, that grin very disconcerting as it came closer. She was feral looking, some wild woman from the depths of a dark jungle. As she prepared to spring, I saw a pair of headlights pin her to the spot as they approached us. I did run then. I ran from the bench and threw myself into the cab, telling the man to drive before the door was even shut. He looked confused, turning back to the girl as if to ask if she needed a ride too, but his confusion didn't last. The color drained from his face as he got a look at her, and he yelled for me to close the door. He pulled off with a squeal of tires, and we both watched the woman as we drove away, her smiling face getting smaller as she watched us. I leaned against the seat, panting as I tried to control my galloping heart. He had to try a couple of times before I could hear him over the blood pounding in my ears. And when I finally made sense of it, we were turning around to get back on the route. "You got very lucky, fella. More lucky than you know." I asked him why I thought so, and he told me a story I'll never forget. A couple of nights ago, I got a call to that same bus stop to pick up a fare. Dispatch said he sounded weird when he called, like he'd been running, but his car had broke down near the stop, so he figured he had just been pissed off about his luck. I pulled up about 20 minutes later and found not a middle-aged man fuming over his car, but that same girl with the Cheshire Cat grin on her face. She looked up at me as I came to stop, and I just knew that if I got out of my cab, they'd never find me again. The area near Dusty's is supposed to be off limits, and after tonight, I don't think Sandy's will be picking up out here until the situation changes. I've been sitting in my living room, hands shaking as I write this, but unsure of what to do now. I called Charlie before I got into my apartment, but I don't think they really believed me. Charlie was pretty drunk and sounded like he thought I was making fun of him. I hope they make it home safe, but it's that dangerous smile that I can't get out of my mind. She's out there somewhere, waiting for her next victim, and I feel very fortunate to be able to tell you my story and not be a squib in tomorrow's paper. I think that'll do it for us today. Thanks for stopping by. I really do love to see you come back every day for more cozy horror. Until next time, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.